Hello, this is Navneet Upadhyay. Welcome to our second video. In the first video, we have discussed the introduction and source and reading tactics about international relations and about this particular book. Now, in this part of video, we will discuss about first chapter of this book, not entire first chapter, but the starting of the first chapter. That is, start from the name, the making of the modern world. Yeah, this is very much associated with this written name, the making of the modern world, and you are going to learn something deep about how the international relations have evolved in the span of time, and how it is shaped the modern world. And we start from the written here is that international relations as is presented in the flow of daily news. All right, if we talk about international relation, it is associated with our daily events, daily development, and important geopolitics developments. Then this is concerned a large number of disparate events. Leaders are meeting, negotiations are concluded, wars are started, acts of terror committed, and so on. If we talking about examples, is that the development of Iran-US relations and Iran-China relations and India-Pak relations, India-China relations, and day-to-day terrorist attack and rise of Taliban's, rise of ISIS. These are the events that is categorized into international relations. Then these are the events are very much associated with the past and how they shaped, how that organizations are shaped, and so on. In order to make sense of all this information, we need to know a lot about the contemporary world and its history. Okay, well, if you talk about the SSB discussion, group discussion, and lecture, it is very important to be discuss the way how everything is developing and how events are taking place. You must have to be very much deeply aware about how international relations are formed and how it is developing day by day. Then we will talk about the history of the world and something about that is associated with international relations. We need to understand how all the disparate events hang together. At university, we study these topics, but it is a basic tenet of academic study. That is actually not very important. So, in this chapter, we will discuss deeply about how the history of the world has evolved time to time. So, let us begin by thinking big. What is international relations? In this chapter, we will discuss what is international relations, how was it made, and how did it come to be that way. And actually, there are 195 states, and they are similar and different to each other, obviously, because in this particular chapter, writer says that the state is a good place to start because there are a lot of states in the world. In fact, according to the latest count, there are no fewer than 195 of them states, and obviously very different from each other, but they are also similar to each other in point of respects. Obviously, there are actually a state in itself is a very big identity, and obviously there are a lot of states and a lot of similarities and differences in the entire number of states. And if you talk about the similarities, is that all states are located somewhere. They have a territorial extension surrounded by borders, which tell us where one state ends and another begins. In fact, what is the exception of all right, the writer here talking about Antarctica is that exception that is not claimed yet, and there is virtually no piece of land anywhere on Earth's surface that is not claimed by one state or another, and there is no piece of land that belongs to more than one state. All right, although admittedly the ownership of some pieces of land is disputed. We can take a good example of POK and Pak occupied Kashmir. And also, if we talk about more similarities, that all states have their own capitals, armies, foreign ministries, flag, and national anthems. If we take the example of the recent event of Indian foreign policy in reference to Chinese coronavirus outbreak, I am following the current affairs and our foreign policy development in reference to China. that is very defensive, very protective, because we didn't take initiative to criticize China anymore, and we didn't actually speak in any type of forum to criticize the China's step to preserve and to not telling the world about coronavirus outbreak and all. I think you are aware about it, but going forward is that all states call themselves sovereign. It is very important, as term sovereign, meaning that they claim to extensive right to govern their respective territories in their own fashion. But states are also sovereign in relation to each other. All right, because if a state is governed by itself, and there is no matter where there is dictatorship and democracy or any other form of government, but it is that particular state is sovereign if there is self-governing body, self-government, and elected a person, or dictatorship. It actually, which type of government is there, it doesn't matter in sovereignty, but only in to understand the term sovereignty is that matters is to self-governing. All right, and taking forward to our discussion here, we discuss about similarities, and we often talk about states and though they were persons and interests to defend and plans to carry out. All right, actually, this is the Europe. Europe had no particular relevance. Actually, the writer assumes that, or maybe according to my opinion, it is right. It is obviously right that shaping of the international relation and shaping of the modern world, Europe has a very crucial role. And it starts with the European states, because over the course of the year there have been many different kind of states. Yet this chapter is mainly concerned with the European state and with European developments. There are good reasons for this. And what the reason behind it to take European as a starting of discussion and at the starting of this chapter to understand the international relations? There are good reasons for this, because for much of history Europe was no particular relevance to the rest of the world. And actually Europe wasn't very rich and not very influential, not very not much connections to other continents. And actually you can say European states was very backward before 1500 AC. All right, then the change has begun from year 1500. This was when the Europeans first developed extensive trading links with the rest of the world. The trade helped to spur both economic development and social change, because you can, if you study the modern history, the travelers of European countries are going here and there and occupying territories and establish economic establishment and trading companies and all. This lead to the development of the Europe overall, and that trade helped to spur both economic development and social change. As a result, the Europeans began to assert themselves. Eventually, in the later part of the 19th century, European states occupied and colonized the bulk of the world. We all are aware about it very beautifully, because Europe occupied the territories of the world by going there, like Africa, India, Asia. You can say in every continent, European countries have colonized the world and occupied the very large part of the territory of the earth, and dramatically transforming the course of world history. Obviously, because if we study about the modern history and medieval history of any particular country, if that particular country is related with the colonized world and related with the Commonwealth, then obviously the history of the particular state or particular nation is well formed by Europeans. And yet as we will see, it was only when the colonized countries become independent in the 20th century that the European state and the European way of organizing international relations finally become the universal norm. Because if, for example, if we take the example of this particular concern, is that if any particular country occupied by any particular state, then it is very much a possibility of governing that occupied country by that country who occupied them for years. And when they get independence, a lot of structures like education system, like everything that a particular government is controls, everything has changed. Everything changed, and sorry for it. Everything changed, and today's international system is for good and for bad, made by Europeans and by non-European, copying European examples. Because if we take the example of our country, India, our modern history is totally, entirely shaped by European nation, United Kingdom, and also the role of Netherlands and Spain and many other European countries. And in tomorrow's lecture, we will discuss the rise of the sovereign state. And this particular series is going to be very interesting because we learn deeply about international relations in a very proper manner. I'm sorry if I'm making grammatical mistakes and other speaking mistakes. Forgive me. And this is Navneet Upadhyay signing off for now.